morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the May edition of the seminar series of the Structural Development Macroeconomics Research Group. Today we have the pleasure of having with us Julia Juarez Garcia, Dr. Julia Juarez Garcia, that is a researcher in Mexico, in the Universidad Nacional Autónoma de Mexico, in Ciudad de Mexico. And she will be talking a little bit about politics, the political aspects of economic development, and bringing together the structuralist tradition that we kind of know very well here in Latin America, and a big name in economics, especially among alternative approaches, that is Kalecki. So Julia, is an absolute pleasure having you with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's okay in this way, right? You can hear me, right?
Absolutely, okay. Yes.
Great. So, well, I'm really happy to be here to share with you guys and to share with anyone who watches this video later about this article. Well, this topic, it's one of the main ones in my research agenda. I'm talking about Kalecki and structuralism, but in this occasion, I decided to try to bring together the political dimension between these two perspectives, heterodox and very critical perspectives. And the reason why I'm sharing you this article is because it's part of or was part of a special issue within the group. So, and I think it represents me very well. So I'm going to start. This is a more, it's not applied at all. It's a theoretical one, of course, and it's more like I can say like a reflection. I try to open a discussion because it doesn't exist, this discussion, I have to say. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, but it's the first step in my opinion to this direction. Hey, Marvin, how many time I have?
Let's say 45 minutes. You have a good 45 minutes. Yes, let's go for it.
Yeah. To take in mind that. So, well, as Marvin says, the title is Political Aspects on Economic Development. I choose this title not because of because it was like an idea of empty, but because an article, a very famous article of Kalecki called Political Aspects of Full Employment. So I put together like these words. So that's why I choose this. So I think this is the structure of the presentation, not the article, of course, but I try to explain myself in these 7 steps. Okay, first of all, my motivation. As I said, I try to reconstruct or rebuild the political dimension of Kalecki, but thinking about economic development, because as we may know, or maybe we don't know, but Kalecki actually has some kind of economic theory, of economic development theory, but it's not that much famous as maybe Lewis or Nurkse or some other authors, but he has one. So, but I tried to highlight the political dimension, but throughout 3 main articles, as I said before, the political aspects of full employment. Another one from, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this for the 50s, about economic development. And the political one for me, it's the intermediate regimes, thinking about the developing economies. So this is my first motivation, to take these three articles and put together and put them, all of them, to talk between them. That's the point. And the major, what I try to fill, it's these two gaps, to try to fill the gap of the absence of systematic Kaleckian theory of development in one hand, and on the other, the lack of the systematization of the political thought of Kalecki. Okay, with the introduction, as I said, well, maybe this is a very a personal question, why Kalecki? But who is Kalecki, but why Kalecki? And I have to say, that Kalecki, because he has this pioneering work, in my opinion, regarding political aspects, but in the way of demand principle, of course. And he has this this sensitive to bring together class structure, but also demand effective principle, but also power spaces theory or something like that, because I developed this in this paper. And but also we have this less known trajectory of Kalecki in Warsaw, actually, about a very not when I cannot say that it is a huge, but maybe he has a very diversity research group within Warsaw, people from Latin America, but also from Asia and from some other regions, to talk about economic development. Actually, he founded this research center in the Warsaw University, and he was the mentor of a lot of economists in all these areas that I said. So there is a tradition within this theory, and of course, there are a lot of articles and books and notes of Kalecki, but these three ones that I mentioned, it's like less known articles, maybe for me, I think. So that's why I try to pull all the good ideas of Kalecki regarding political together, as I said. So the central research question of the articles on general is, what can Kalecki theory of development can contribute to understand the political aspect of development within structuralism framework? Why structuralism? Well, because I've been working a lot in some other articles, but in this I just mentioned very quickly regarding the communication within the economic theory between the structuralism and Kalecki, because or throughout the thinking of dual economies or dual models, and the dialogue. I'm going to talk about this dialogue between Lewisian duality and structural center periphery duality. So there for me and for some others, of course, there is a very interesting critical dialogue between them. But well, going to my hypothesis is that the Kalecki three key texts offer this valuable insight into political economy of development. And when we integrate the Latin America structuralism, we can reveal how the supply side structural constraint that we know that the theories of economic development has been studied in the years. Reveals how these supply side structural constraints shaped by this political aspect undermine the aggregate demand in this way, the path throughout the development of developing economies. So my contribution is to offer an alternative policy prioritization under this binding supply constraint in the one hand, and then the other incorporating this political dimension, as I said. So the first sentence in this article is that if there is, because it is not common to say in this way, but if there is a theory of economic development, a Kaleckian economic development, the origin is within the lectures that actually Kalecki bring here in Mexico City in 1953. At CEMLA, it's a center of Latin American and monetarian studies. He has these lectures here, and he presents his model, his canonical model, the department model, the two department model, and published first in El Trimestre Económico in Mexico, but then in English in a Indian journal in the 1 or 2 years later. So knowing this, and actually maybe this is other reason why I've been like so obsessed with Kalecki and this part. We may, well, the title of this article is the problem of financing economic development. First, when we saw this title, we can think about, okay, financing, so which means money on interest rates or some these elements, but actually he started to think about finance the development throughout the capabilities, throughout the material, throughout how to offer or how to think about the supply constraint, but throughout another or a very different view, the material one, the productive view, we can say. So financing for Kalecki in this context is not access to money, but means allocation of real resources within the economy, because for him, this is the big problem of economic development. So if we go like deep and we go and visit the lectures and notes of Jan Toporowski, because he has writing about this last year, we can find the distributive dilemma within economic development, within the financing economic development, which means at the end of the issue, the distributive dilemma is determining which social groups will absorb the cost of expanding the capital accumulation. Since we have this supply constraint, we need to of course, achieve a more or a higher capital accumulation, but we are going to face costs. So who is going to pay for it? That's the point when we think about the financing development. Okay. So in this paper, there is some others, but in this paper, I'm not going into the details into his theory of the departments. But what we need to know is that for Kalecki, the main difference between developed economies and developing economies, it's of course we are going to find the supply side constraint, as I said, but it's related more about the double need. That's what I said, like the chronic need of investment in developing economies, because the unemployment in developed economies is because of and it's not there is not enough effective demand, and we have the cycle, as we may know. But in developing economies, we're going to have unemployment because of the scarcity of capital equipment. So that's why there is like the difference. There is some others, but this is the main one. And he started to develop this structural duality, putting into the earth of this the chronic need for investment, or the double need. In one hand, he identified the industrial sector, which is a demand-driven sector. We can say a normal Kaleckian sector, demand-led sector. But also he identifies this agricultural sector, which is supply constrained, which means is supply-led sector. And that's why and also in the organization terms, we are going to find a semi-feudal organization and, of course, inelastic supply. So throughout this channel, I have to say in this point that we can, if we know what is about the structural heterogeneity and all this body of literature, we are going to find that this is very related to structural heterogeneity in the context of structuralism, Latin American structuralism. But for Kalecki, the problem is that these economies, developing economies, needs enough investment, not only because of the fluctuation of the cycle, the normal one, but also to cover this need for offer to new workers into the industrial sector more commodities. That's the point. And this is a huge between structural inflation theory developed in one hand in the structuralism with Noyola and Zunkel, and in the other hand developed by Kalecki. So on general terms, this is the difference that Kalecki identifies. So what I try to do here, it's a very simple exercise to put together the three components in this article that Kalecki identifies as what the developing economies needs to do in order to achieve this extra investment that the extra amount of investment that this economy needs. So of course we're going to have a closed economy, no government, blah blah blah. And in one hand, we are going to have that maybe, okay, the investment is not only public, but also private. But of course, in this kind of economies, we don't have enough private amounts of investment. So we can cover by throughout the public investment. And on the other hand, we're going to have the foreign trade. I have to say in this point that of course Kalecki doesn't have so much more things about external restrictions or something like that. But he says about that, well, you can import, but you will need to have some kind of structural change. But this is another thing that Kalecki don't go like so much deep about this, I have to say. But what Kalecki goes through, it's about this third mean, the consumption one, because since workers consume, of course, industrial gas, but also commodity gas of primary ones, we are going to have the mean of inflation in this last one. So yeah, this is what I just said. You are going to have inflation pressures if you don't have enough capabilities to respond on a more or a higher industrial sector. But there is another part, the political part of Kalecki in another article, the second part of this article, in 1965, I think, 1965, the title is kind of the same, the problems of financing economic development in mixed economies. So in this second part, we can see another profile of Kalecki, a more social justice Kalecki, where he finds that there is some solutions to face this economic issue, but this solution it's not like ethical, because he talk about the quality of life of workers. So you have to provide them enough resources, enough level, so you cannot like squeeze wages, which is the mean that he can find to answer the question of the obstacles of development economy. So he preferred to go into another or a very different direction, which is to face the inflation pressure throughout the consumption of agricultural workers, actually. But the main point here is that for Kalecki, the problem is a distribution one of the economic development. This is the problem, but he identifies this need for social justice into economic development theory. And in this point, as I said before, if we go deeper, and there is some authors here in Mexico, there is Julio López Gallardo who go into the debate. It's not a debate, because in that time Luis didn't think about Kalecki, of course, and vice versa. But in these days we can find these debates. The dual sector model of Luis. Of course, we know that he goes into the classical problem related with unlimited supply labor. If we start to read his article, we're going to find this. This is the first sentence, literally, like Luis says, like, I'm going to the classical rules and blah 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 blah. But the point is, because of this debate, because Luis was thinking about a single path to get over the underdeveloped situation in these economies. And Kalecki, on the other hand, thinks about that we have two sectors, and both of them have to go higher together, because both of them are important for the economy. So we start to notice the debate. But the most direct debate is, of course, between the classical economic development theory and structuralism, or the Anglo-Saxon structuralism and Latin American structuralism, which is a more we can find a lot of more like authors talking about this. But the point of why I named this Kaleskian structuralism or a structuralist perspective, it's because we can find this share between, as I said, structural heterogeneity and the duality of the Kaleskian duality, we can say. Yeah, so this is like a very general view of Latin American structuralism. I'm not going to go into the details, but the only thing that we have to know that we have the center periphery dichotomy in one hand with the structuralism, and with Kalecki, the supply-led sector, or the with inelastic supply, and the demand-led sector. We have this dichotomy also. And of course, the dialogue between Kalecki and structuralism, or maybe the most famous one, is the structural theory of inflation regarding Noyola's work. We can say a lot of things about this, but I don't want to do a lot more. Maybe one thing that is important for us is Furtado's work, because I think structuralism is heterodox. I don't want to say like post-Keynesian, but heterodox because of Furtado at the end of the history. So this is like a comparative table for a comparison between structuralist approaches. I don't know. The difference is it's related with the thing that I just said. Distribution, the role of the distribution, the political economy within them, and how they try to fix this stage of underdeveloped and some other things. So going into another thing, the political aspects of this full employment. I'm going, yeah, here, this one. Now we have in mind that we have this dialogue of Kalecki economic theory and blah blah blah. But now we are going to go into the political aspects of Kalecki in general. First of all, we have this paper, the political aspects of full employment, in one hand. So what I try to do here is to make it easier to understand throughout the channels of effective demand decomposition. What is the discussion of Kalecki between every class in the structure, in the political structure, and how they like have this, what I name, distribute these power spaces, you know. As we may know, income, and we have wage profit shares and wage shares and all this stuff. Also, we are going to have like kind of the same, but in the power. We can find this very clear throughout the degree of monopoly of Kalecki, and that's why Kalecki have this political economy perspective. So he finds that the way of he tried to answer why full employment. I mean, full employment is not impossible. It's over there. It's in the table. But why it's not that easy to achieve? The answer is it's kind of easy. The answer is not economic. It's in economic terms, but in political terms. We have these classes within the economy, and particularly the capitalists, who doesn't want to give up into the power spaces, and they prefer to have this tolerable underemployment, and to do not give more power to the workers. That's like the main message of Kalecki, and the answer why full employment it's not achievable in political terms. So we have a political challenge. The redistribution is it's more like equitable, but most political resist, you know. So we have this private investment. Well, this is the, I'm sorry, this is the main message into political aspects. And of course, we have this public channel or public tool to achieve this full employment. But since capitalists doesn't want to give the power, so the government face obstacles or barriers, political barriers. Yeah, so this is, I just said this. So at the end, I put this into a matrix to put together two kind of body of literatures. In one hand, the political aspects of Kalecki, but in the other one, the post-Kaleckian framework, which means we assume a wage-led economy, not a profit-led one. And we have these power spaces, as I said, the private power, which means workers and capitalists, and the public one, which means like which class the power, the public or the government or the public sector supports. So we are going to have this is kind of Stockhammer and Lavoie matrix, but putting into the discussion the political aspects of full employment, but also the Kaleckian theory of economic development, kind of. But here we are going to sing the for developed economies. So what I try to do now, this is the final part, is to rethink these political aspects into development, which means, as I said, the last paper, regarding the intermediate regimes. I have to say that it seems like there is a lot of articles talking about this, but there is not that much. I think there is maybe only 4 very important and high cited articles, but not that much. I mean, maybe some other Kaleckians are like speaking about intermediate regimes, but there is not that much literature, I have to say. But what means, or what is intermediate regimes? Of course, we have to see that these articles was written in a decade where there was not a formal, or I think that there was not like economic development files organization, which means Kalecki, there is some author that said that intermediate regimes refer to developing economies in our terms, but Kalecki didn't say about this. It was not clear about this. It was like, well, we have these kind of economies, was a outcome of post-colonial states or the colonization process in the world. So we have this kind of regimes. He finds that these kind of economies face an absence of a consolidated native bourgeois, which means that the government tried to take, not control, but get in charge. It was not something like a path to socialism, because these kind of economies were within or in the middle in political terms, because they didn't develop enough bourgeois class. So the state take this place, or take the initiative to have this place. So, and that's why the predominant capital within this kind of economies were a foreign capital. So, okay, as I said, there is a historical context. There is actually an article of Kalecki applying this for Bolivia case in political terms. So what I try to do here is to identify the different dimensions that this kind of intermediate regimes has. They have, in political terms, a strong state with a lower middle class dominance within this economy, an ideological struggle between a foreign capitalism and state capitalism. This is the part that I take into the discussion. The role of the external sector, not only in economic terms, but in political terms. Since this kind of economies doesn't have a capitalist class that is stronger or enough strong, so they like cover this lack with external capital, which means external influence of or the external influence of external capitalism or capitalist. So in economic terms, we have this foreign dependence, of course, and no, I just said this, it's not a consolidated native bourgeois. And in social terms, we are going to have this kind of rural economies with this dichotomy within external industrial sector, which means structural heterogeneity, and blah, blah, blah. So the important part here is to take into these articles this foreign dependency in political terms. So what these intermediate regimes face is a vicious cycle, a chronic investment need in economic terms, but also a foreign political dependence, in novus, or no, they do not find a stimulus within the domestic demand, but the external demand throughout the trade. So this is my point, and this is like the final tool of the article, to put together these power spaces within the economic problems of developing economies that I just said at the beginning of this first article, and take together these political aspects of this second article that I just said, the full employment, and finally the third element of external dependence in political terms of intermediate regimes. We have these three levels of the distribution of the power. So at the end, we have here in the vertical axis, we have the sectors, the private sector. We have the wages means the workers, of course, the profit extern, which means the external capitalists and the internal ones, and then we have the public power in the horizontal axis, and the distribution of kind of policies that the public has. We have, for example, in the first quadrant, the upper one, we have, for example, profit intern public policy, which means a policy who try to benefit internal capitalism, and the positive response of internal capitalism, which means a domestic profit-driven policy. And in this way, what I try to do in the whole article, in this point, and from this point and in the other discussion that I tried to make, it's to identify different phases of the development regarding the power distribution into not only Latin America, but in general, the developing economies. So I said, for example, well, we can find like this policy of this shift in Latin America of neoliberalism, where they try to benefit the external capitalism and try to give them more power into the decisions of economic policy, and this mix within this framework. So at the end, what I can say, the political, we can find a political constraint into economic development. We can find a lot of elements. There is so much more elements into these articles, but some other literature with regarding the political constraint. But what I try to do here is to bring into the discussion the logical part of Kaleckian theory in this regard. Also trying to open the discussion in political terms of structuralism, as I said at the beginning, and try to put them to try to have this convergence between Kalecki, Prebisch, and Furtado, with some notes within the article. And Okay, and also, what is the operationalization of this framework? We can find some attempts to try to apply this kind of literature, and I put some of these examples, and why this is important for some other literature. For example, there is this literature of political economy of green transition in developing economies, so we can find this opportunity within this. And well, the summary of my arguments are what I just said: the structural supply side constraint within this kind of economy, the distributive dilemma in the economic development, and the importance of intermediate regimes in this. And I think this is the references that I use here in this presentation, and that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julia, for this very interesting presentation, again, on the intersection of two topics and two traditions that are very important for the structural development economics research group, right? So I have a couple of questions about this article and about this project, and maybe we can start this conversation, continue this conversation on the materials I just presented. And I know that you mentioned both in you mentioned in your slides more clearly that Kalecki doesn't really, I don't want to say doesn't really care much, but he doesn't give much attention to the external constraint, right? Mm-hmm. So like some version of the balance of payments constraint growth model, right? So, but he also wrote long time ago, and you're kind of bringing together these traditions, and for structuralism, the availability of dollars is just very important for development processes, right? So, and we can see Argentina, the experience of Argentina in these recent years as an example of a binding external constraint. Mm-hmm. They just run out of dollars, and growth has to stop. Accessing foreign technologies, modern production technologies, accessing the standards, the living standards, the consumption standards of the global north or developed countries requires access to dollars. So the external constraint is very important. So I was wondering how the external constraint enters your synthesis or your story of Kalecki plus structuralism.
Yeah. Well, actually, the reason why I started to think about this idea was not only the Argentina case, but the whole, I mean, the current situation that we are going through, of course, regarding some external governments trying to decide what is going to happen inside. I mean, we can talk about this today or like 2 decades, and it's going to be kind of the same. Always there is someone. What?
Yeah. No, go on.
Yeah. So there is always someone outside trying to decide for us in terms of Latin America. And the reason why I didn't decide to go into the economic dimension, it's because Kalecki, it's not clear, but he all the time are like putting into another issue, the external one. He actually has some kind of attempt into a note. It is not an article, but a note regarding he says something like domestic imports or exports. It's domestic exports. He thinks about he has this model, this development model, as I said. So he saw the government as a kind of external external agent who can export import from within the system, the models, the structure, the industrial sector, because I mean he can buy goods and he can sell other ones. So he has a note regarding like putting the government as an external agent, but some others has to try to, others like not that much, like a couple of ones, maybe Toporowski, I think I am almost sure that Toporowski mentioned this, to try to take this and put into external terms, the external constraint terms. But of course, there is some other attempts regarding the multi-sectoral models with post-Keynesian traditions, but trying to gather some Kaleckian, for example, functions or the investment function and all this. But I have to say that Kalecki didn't do that. But if we think about this, the structural constraints of economic development, it's completely different, and I'm sure that we are going to face or going to find that there is a dialogue in the external terms with the structuralism, with a term of trade hypothesis, the Singer-Prebisch hypothesis. So, in my opinion, it is not that hard to take this step into and try to make this dialogue within Kalecki and structuralism. And for me, the answer of this is the terms of trade within the economy. But if we go like in the external terms, we're going to find the Singer-Prebisch hypothesis. For me, there is a logical transition. I mean, we can find it's very easy to develop. Not maybe the easy is not the correct word, but we can try to do that, and we are going to find that. But my point here in this article, it's not to go into this direction, because for me it is a completely different one and deserves a single article only for this topic in economic terms. But I decided to take this intermediate regimes dimension because Kalecki is very open in terms of the intervention of the outsiders into Latin America or into intermediate regimes into political spaces, which for me makes sense because they go throughout capitalism and of course the profit share and of course some other elements into this context.
Oh, fantastic! Thank you again. And maybe if you could help me with a second question that came to my mind while I was reading the paper, is that Kalecki is a very rich author, right? And it has a different faces or different sides. I was introduced to Kalecki through two papers, one from 1935 in Econometrica, a macroeconomic theory of the business cycle, and 30 years later, his economic journal paper in 1968, Trend in Business Cycles Reconsider. So the way I was introduced to Kalecki emphasized a lot the role of investment and trying to explain business cycles, and maybe even trying to explain growth cycles, so beyond business cycles, endogenous business cycles, and the possibility of growth cycles. You're covering a different Kalecki, right? A Kalecki that is concerned with development processes. But then I was wondering your thoughts on how these two Kaleckis interact. Is there a role for this Kalecki interested in business cycles, endogenous business cycles, and nonlinearities that are part of the economic system, and the Kalecki that the developmentalistic Kalecki, the Kalecki that is interested in development processes?
Yeah, I think this is a very cute question regarding all the Kalecki life. Because we can find, we can say that two kind of Kaleckis. One, the early Kalecki, the enthusiastic one, the theoretical one, the economist one, actually. But then we have in the middle the bureaucracy, the international bureaucracy phase of Kalecki in the UN. And then we have this other Kalecki, the one that I'm talking about now, the one that be aware in that moment in his life that there was some other problems, not only in developing economy, of course, but the socialist economies also, because he has this another strand of his theory. And that's why, for me and for there's an article of Danby, I think maybe it was
Who? Say again?
Danby.
Okay.
Danby. He wrote about maybe he take all the report of Kaleski when he was in the UN and put together and try to find like, look, Kaleski in this way he was thinking this because he wrote this, but of course it is impossible to say something like that because there are reports, institutional reports, but he tried to show how Kaleski developed his more critical thoughts once he was out the UN,
Okay.
So it is very interesting. It is not clear, but you can guess that it is clear this transition. I wrote some months or maybe years ago something like try to compare the lives in terms of the trajectories, the intellectual trajectories, not the life like personal life, but academic one, within like Juan Noyola, and Kaleski, and it's very similar. Not because something magic, but it was common at that time that when you were, I mean, in the context of Cold War, when you were into this kind of international institution, you have this. You need to be like keep yourself like very very institutional. But Noyola and Kaleski decide to go out into this bureaucracy in order to speak about the reality that they saw, I guess, because I don't have proof, but I don't have doubts. So yeah, there are differences, but I want to talk a note about the cycle. We have to remind that Raúl Prebisch, when he before UN, before CECLAC, Raúl Prebisch was like this cycle theory, you know, and this idea, and actually has a lot of has a critical a lot of critiques against Keynes because of this and because of some other things, but one of it was because of this. Keynes doesn't have this, he didn't develop a cycle theory or something like that, but Kaleski did.
Yes.
So before UN, we can find this Kaleski, this cycle theoretical Kaleski with the business cycle and all this stuff. But then after UN, we are going to find the Kaleski who says like, okay, yeah, there is a cycle in terms of business, in terms of demand. But the problem within the developing economies and the socialist economies, it's not the cycle. It's because they cannot even achieve the cycle because they have this constraint, and they have first they have like to fill this gap and then achieve the cycle, and then like put themselves into this way, and then we can think about to the theory of the dynamic Kaleski, but at that point it is impossible. But for him it is still very important, the investment. So that's why I said like he identified this double need of investment, the cycle investment in one hand, but in the other, the structural investment in terms of capabilities, the productive capabilities. So I don't know if that's a good answer.
So you would say that the role of investment, the central role of investment, appears through Kaleski's trajectory, but the United Nations is an important division. He was maybe more concerned about business cycles and nonlinear dynamics before the UN, and after the UN, this development side appears more strongly, and his political. And then he writes a lot more about politics and the political aspects of employment, development, and whatever.
Yeah. Because if you saw at the dates, the years that where Kaleski wrote about intermediate regimes, but full employment, blah blah blah, was after UN, not before. So that's why, maybe it is, and that's another maybe thing that I tried to put into the table, to recognize this critical critical of the critical of the critical of Kalecki,
Sure.
political one, not only the theoretical one.
Okay. No, this absolutely makes sense. And because because you were referring to the table, to your table that kind of summarizes, right? You have a couple of tables that summarize the synthesis that you're proposing. Maybe my last question, or the last thing that we maybe could talk about today, is the role of the lower middle class.
Yeah.
Because the lower middle class appears to be a very important piece
Yes.
of this puzzle, and I mean, to use kind of the definition, I think you use a reference to Rush in the 70s. It includes small owners in agriculture, industry, commerce, and self-employed individuals, and so on and so on and so forth. They seem to be a very important piece on development, or the puzzle of development. But my impression, at least from the Brazilian experience, and I hope I'm not offending anybody, but my impression from the Brazilian experience is that this group is not interested in development at all. They are they're perhaps more conservative in all possible ways. And so I don't know your thoughts about the old lower middle class. The old meaning the lower middle class that Kalecki wrote about in the 50s, 60s, and the lower middle class that we have now in Mexico, in Brazil, that at least superficially, to me, it looks like they are not interested in a development agenda or something more. I mean, yeah, I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. Of course, I think there is a lot of reasons why Kalecki, not why, but we can guess why Kalecki named intermediate regimes.
Okay.
Or maybe not. Maybe Kalecki just choose the name because of some other reasons. But I want to imagine something.
Yeah.
Maybe one of the reasons it's because the intermediate means at some point that you can go up or you can go down. It's like the gray area. And in the terms of intermediate regimes and the middle income classes, but the lower, not it's also in political terms where I mean, I don't want to be I'm not a specialist of politics, but the only thing that I know is the important one is that we have a cycle also, a political cycle. And since Kalecki has this political, this cycle, pardon, this economic cycle within his theory, it is easy to see that also there is a within, or it's overlapping within the economic cycle, a political cycle also, because at some point in the business cycle and this thing, we are going to find the need of investment, but then we are going to have also with the Minskinian tradition, we are going to find a lot of some other tools, which mean that also you have this gray area within the political cycle, where sometimes they are in the dark side, in the right side, and sometimes in the left side, in the red side also. So for me, if we can try to compare this middle income class in like 50 years ago or something, and the one that we have now, it is part of the cycle, I think, because, for example, in Mexico now, it is a belief. I have no proofs, but I have no doubts, as I said, that in the current years, 8 years ago, when the left party wins for the first time, we can feel how this middle income class became right, it became left into the left party, or they put into this position, and now we have this president, this first woman president, and all of them are like supporting her, and so for me, this middle income class are where the possibilities to realize their capitals are. So right now, in Mexico, for example, the opportunities to invest is in the left side within speaking about politics. So we can see in Argentina, in Brazil, of course, in Chile also, and some other countries where now they are into the right side. I don't want to say the right side, but the right side, you know?
They are more right wing, let's say. They're more aligned with right wing views.
Yeah,
More conservative views. More conservative views.
Conservative views. So my final point with this is that Kalecki, when he started to wrote about this, he identifies that since there are no bourgeois class, a consolidated class, you have this empty space where the state at that time, where the state takes place, not necessary as a dictatorial regime, but as to fill this gap. But of course, you can find a danger into this dynamic. Since you have this empty of power, there is a lot of opportunities to the external power throughout external capital, but of course also within the economy, within the dictatorial regimes. And maybe this is a one possible, not answer. It is, I don't want to say that Kalecki guessed like what was like about to happen in Chile and in the region in the dictatorial regimes in the 70s and all this phase. But you can find that the weak of the distribution of the power within these intermediate regimes. And the reason or this style fact that you said that it's currently happening in Brazil in the time with Bolsonaro, for example, that is the answer, the weakness of the distribution of the power.
Thank you, Julia, and thank you very much again for sharing the results of your research with the group, for participating with us this last hour in what is a very, very interesting research agenda. And hope to have you with us in the future again.
Yeah, to discuss some other articles, of course.
Absolutely. So we're concluding our seminar here, and see you in June with our monthly edition or June edition of the Structural Development Economics Research Group seminars. So take care. Bye.
Bye.
Julia.
Oye, para Julio tengo una propuesta.
Dime.